We start this afternoon in northeastern Syria, where the Turkish military has launched what it is calling Operation Peace Spring. Now, the offensive comes just after President Donald Trump said U.S. forces would pull out of the same region away from Kurdish fighters there. Now, the same Kurdish fighters that have been a key ally in the fight against ISIS. So to learn more, we turn to Arash Aramesh, national security and foreign policy analyst. Thank you so much for joining us, Ari.
Good to be here.
You know, we point out that they're fighting, they're leaving what they say is the Kurdish fighters, but is it just the Kurdish fighters that are in this area of Syria?
This is not a homogenous area. There are different groups of people who live in northern Syria. From northeast Syria, Hasaki, which is by the sort of Iraqi/Turkish border, you have a lot of Christians, you have a lot of Armenians of Armenian descent who are Syrians, but the majority population tends to be Kurdish. Now, again, let's not just try to paint the whole thing with a black and white brush. Right. These areas are not entirely homogenous. You have a heterogeneous population. There are Kurds and Christians and Arabs and Yazidis and so on and so forth who live there. So shells coming from howitzers being bombed, being launched by the Turkish military hit everybody indiscriminately. The problem is we're not there. The problem is we have given them a green light, and the problem is this is the beginning of a Turkish Erdogan incursion into northern Syria.
Well, and that's the question. Why does Erdogan have such an intent on attacking this area, this part of Syria? And why haven't we seen Assad or the Syrian government actually take any defense of it?
Well, the Assad government, since the 2001 uprising and the civil war that started in March of 2011, they've had a shortage of manpower. They couldn't bring in enough troops to protect every area. Their main issue was protect the big cities, Damascus, Aleppo, Hasaki, Homs, and Deir ez-Zor, name it. But allow other forces, such as the Kurds, the YPG, that are pretty close to the PKK, and that's arch nemesis of Erdogan. That's a separatist group in Turkey's Kurdish regions. They give them somewhat autonomy to fight ISIS, to fight radical Muslims, to fight radical Muslim Arab groups, but stay autonomous. There were some clashes between the Syrian government and the Kurds, but never really directly to the point of a full-blown war. The Kurds now control about 1/3 of Syrian territory. It's a huge problem by the Turkish border. Erdogan does not want to see a resurgence with his own Turks. He's trying to create a buffer zone in Syria by pushing the by pushing the Kurds back. Also, by bringing in a lot of those refugees who left Syria, went to Turkey, and trying to house them along the Syrian-Turkish border.
He wants to send them back to their countries.
True, but that's going to be very destabilizing. Every time you pull the trigger on moving populations, you're going to be very destabilizing, A. And B, well, you push back the Kurds, what's going to happen to all these ISIS prisoners who are now being held in northern Syria? What's going to happen to other Islamic forces? And you have Turkish-backed militias now in certain Kurdish villages asking people to put on the veil, put on hijab, and enforcing Sharia law. That's a disaster coming to fruition here.
Well, and that is the question right now that you are looking at, is this expansion of it, and who exactly is going to be attacked, and why is Turkey wanting to expand, and who's our ally in the region? So that's what I want to ask you, is who's our ally? We are in NATO with Turkey, and the agreement is between us that if somebody attacks a NATO ally, guess what? We all have to come to their defense. At this point, Turkey's attacking Syria. What happens if Syria does try to strike back? Does that automatically invoke the United States getting involved?
So to invoke Article 5, you have to have an ally, a NATO ally, coming under fire. This is a little tricky here. To give you an example, for instance, what happened when the Russian forces were fighting Turks during the early stages of the Syrian war. If you remember, the Turkish defense battery or anti-aircraft battery shot down a couple of Russian jets. There were some incursions. There was some sort of exchange of fire. It's not very clear. What is clear here is this. Unfortunately, President Trump, for whatever reason, has dropped the ball on Syria and has also dropped the ball on Turkey. A lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of people in the national security circles would say America has a role to play. America has a stabilizing role to play. And I know a lot of people would blame the U.S. for some of its actions in Syria, but again, pulling out and leaving the Mideast to Russia, to Iran, to Syria, and to small little powers in the region like Saudi Arabia and Iran would have long-term consequences and disastrous consequences.
But that's the question, Tiz. I mean, Trump campaigned on the fact that we were going to end these endless wars. And supposedly there is now, President Trump says 50, I've heard as much as 1,000 troops were pulled out of this region. thoughts are Erdogan was going to do this anyway. Did he give President Trump kind of the heads up, get your guys out of there? Because he knew if there were soldier bags coming home in body bags,
right,
the United States would get employed in this. So did Erdogan basically tip President Trump, say, get your soldiers out of here because it's about to escalate?
So this has definitely been in the making for some time now. Not only Erdogan sort of coordinated and heads up with President Trump, but also with Russian forces on the ground. There are more the Russian troops, Russian air defense system, Russian ground forces, there are Russian advisors, and also
So why don't we
Iranians.
just leave it to them? Aren't they better prepared to try to bring peace? Erdogan actually, the Kremlin released a statement saying that he had the conversation. And Erdogan said he was going to agree to not risk the peace in the area, the peace process that was going on. Then he turns.
You know what? As much as President Trump's populist message of let's leave everybody alone and pull the troops out, America has a responsibility to enforce peace and to enforce stability. Little rogue government
where?
says well, it says
Where
I.
is it? Okay, says I would say where.
It
I
says
want
a
to
lot
see
of
that
people.
law. Right.
Says, no, there's not a law, but it says a lot of people who also believe that American security and the umbrella of American security provided around the globe has kept the world safe, has prevented wars, and since World War II, we have established a world order that has guaranteed trade, that has guaranteed prosperity, that has guaranteed growth with minor frictions. You leave little bad actors like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Syria to themselves, hallelujah, we're going to have problems.
Well, and that's what we're kind of seeing. The pot's starting to boil on this side. Thank you so much for joining us, Ari. We hope we hope you will come back because unfortunately the situation is not going to tame down anytime soon. It's hard to clear through the debris and get right down to the nitty-gritty that is real news. New details are coming to light in the case of Jeffrey Epstein as more
Spread between the 2-year Treasury yield and the 10-year Treasury yield.
Several hundred students are staging a sit-in.
the Amazon rainforest, and the blame game is underway. It's time for RT America. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button.